The lawyers on the bad side, that's what they do always. Every environmental disaster. They come in and they hire someone to say, there's not enough X to make people sick. Whatever X is, insert X here, right? And therefore, people who think that they're sick are tragically psychosomatic, right? That's what they came to court and said in Hawaii.
Hey, it's Jordan. I am in Flint, Michigan, East Palestine, Ohio, Tumwa, Iowa. Please support the only independent outlet on the ground covering what the corporate media covers up. That settlement went through. There is an appeal being efforted, but outside of that, there has now been a new lawsuit waged. So far, it seems that there are quite a lot of residents have signed on, and this is against Norfolk Southern and other defendants, and it is claiming wrongful death, which is key. So let me bring on now Christina Baer. Tell me what distinguishes this lawsuit from what I just described, which was the massive class action. Norfolk Southern settled for $600 million. From what we know, it was already that's their insurance policy, and underneath the hood of that settlement, there's not like universal health care for residents. Residents, if they had to fork back over their reimbursement if they stayed at hotels. Tell us about your lawsuit, who you're representing, and who you're going after.
So class action lawyers don't represent the people. They represent a class. And so really they just report to themselves. And nothing against class action lawyers, but I'm not one. I'm not a class action lawyer. I'm not a mass tort lawyer. I'm not even a personal injury lawyer. I am a community safety lawyer, and I'm called into communities that are really hurting. And when they ask for help, I show up. So this community called me in December. I showed up, I listened, I cared. I met Chrissy and others, and I started hearing their stories, and I started to build a legal team to take this on, because this matters. And the class action, as you know, was not enough. Imagine 400 million ended up with the people divided by 55,000. That's nothing. These people lost their livelihoods. They lost their homes. They were uprooted. They had special needs kids that had to, go without therapy, right? Kids are regressing in their developmental milestones. You just talked about the hormonal issues, and the class action wasn't enough. Whatever is happening in your life, when you throw toxins at it, it's going to get worse. Right? So whatever people had going on in their life, this put them over the edge. We have a family that had many, many healthy children, 9, and then they have a miscarriage, and then they have a baby that dies at a week old. They actually had 2 miscarriages in there after the derailment. That's not normal, right? But you also just have someone who's 65 and has respiratory issues, and you put someone with respiratory issues in a toxic house, and that happened to everybody. So it's not surprising that our case has 7 wrongful deaths. I mean, we represent 744 people. This was a community that was rocked, as you know, and I know I'm just preaching to the choir, but it affected their health for everybody. And one thing that I'm struck by is the effect on the brain, as I'm sure you've heard residents tell you, but I have not met a resident who didn't feel brain fog, memory loss, confusion, feeling like you've been hit by a truck. And what we know about toxins is that they attack the brain and they cause physiological changes in the brain. You can look at brain scans and see the physiological changes. But you know what else causes physiological changes in the brain? Trauma. And so you have a double brain injury for these people. You have the brain injury from the exposure, and then a brain injury from the trauma. And it's a recipe for disaster, and people are really hurting. The law needs to do 2 things. One, or a case. One is to compensate people. That's important. But the other important aspect of the law and purpose of tort law is deterrence. to make sure it doesn't happen again. And the two have to go hand in hand. You have to compensate enough to have a deterrent effect. And as Chrissy said, this was just insurance, right? This was just insurance money. This was nothing. Last year, they had 51.3 billion in revenue. Maybe it was 53.1.
Yeah.
Or I'm sorry, it was 13. It was 13.1. Anyway, the point is they're making billions of dollars, and this was nothing for them. And that doesn't have a deterrent effect. And we need to bring them to account.
I'd like to ask you, you know, obviously you're not a chemist or anything like that, but you have to learn things for these kind of lawsuits. Something that has struck me, and this is not just with East Palestine, I've covered Flint for almost a decade. In the first lawsuit, the class action attorneys, who you've already pointed out the problems with, they went to an expert to do the testing. His name was Stephen Petty. He was like an expert chemical engineer brought in for many chemical contaminations. So those are the attorneys hired this guy. And then it seems they gagged him. There was essentially a gag order put that he could not release his data on air, water, soil. So this settlement, not your case, but the 600 million was only based on the EPA's data. And as I have reported over and over, the EPA's data is flawed. The EPA itself, officials have said that their testing equipment was not equipped to detect all levels of contamination. So I'd like to ask you, obviously your case is different than the 600 million settlement, but it seems like courts have been making decisions based on the EPA's data claiming everything's fine. Do you believe everything is fine in terms of the data they has presented? And will you be making that case in your lawsuit that independent testing has shown far higher levels of contamination?
Independent testing has shown far levels of contamination for sure. But let's look at who was entrusted to do the testing. You sent the railroad in to manage the testing. The testers reported for much of it to the railroad. That is like sending a criminal in to the crime scene to test for prints. That's not the way we do this. But the thing is, Jordan, it's the way the EPA does it. They all the time, they just come in and they trust whoever the wrongdoer is to do the test and tell them, what? It's all within acceptable limits. They love this phrase, acceptable limits. It's all within acceptable limits. And so when this derailment happened, I was litigating the big case in Hawaii against the United States for contaminating the water with jet fuel. And same thing, the EPA trusted the Navy to do the testing. Well, guess what? The EPA, the Navy and the EPA didn't test for fuel. They tested for total organic compounds. And then they told people that there was non-detects. They had non-detects. So everybody thought that they had non-detects. Well, think about that, right? They're getting, it's not just that they're not getting the testing information about what's in the tests. It's that they're being sure that it's safe. And that is the problem I have. I mean, I have a problem with the lack of transparency. People need to know what they were exposed to. But at the very least, Jordan, don't tell people it's safe. You know, it's not, clearly it's not safe. Right. And do not hire an expert to look at sick people and tell them that they're not sick. I have a problem with that. And that is what the bad guys and the lawyers on the bad side, and I'm calling it the bad side. The lawyers on the bad side, that's what they do always. Every environmental disaster. They come in and they hire someone to say, and follow my logic, Jordan. They say, there's not enough X to make people sick. Whatever X is, insert X here, right? It's within acceptable limits. It was always within acceptable limits. And therefore, people who think that they're sick are tragically psychosomatic, right? That's what they came to court and said in Hawaii. We had 3,000 people who had acute medical symptoms like vomiting and diarrhea. Literally, they had the audacity to come in and tell the federal judge that that was all psychosomatic. And that's what they're doing here. It's very upsetting to me, and it cannot continue. And that's why we filed claims against the EPA and the CDC to call them to account for this exact kind of conduct. You can't come in, test for the wrong things, or have bad equipment that fails, and then tell people it's safe. Right. That is a violation of your own rules. And to be very clear, we're not accusing them of intentional conduct, because that would not be covered by the FTCA. The Federal Tort Claims Act allows people who have been harmed by the negligence of federal officers to bring claims against the United States for the harm. It's a beautiful thing. I think it's patriotic to bring these claims. I used to represent the United States, and it was an honor. And people who've been harmed by the negligence of the United States have a right to compensation. But remember that the compensation is really for the purpose of deterring the bad acts. In this case, these 744 people are standing up and saying, not on my watch, not on my watch. You cannot do this again. It's not going to be this community. It's not going to be the next community. We are going to speak out, and we're going to take a stand so that we protect the families who come behind us. They're speaking, Chrissy is one of our clients in those federal claims, and she's taking a stand for all of us, right? They're taking a stand for all of us.
And before I let you go, I want the residents to be able to speak. If you guys have any questions or comments for her, have at it.
I just like to thank all the attorneys that have stepped up and worked well together, and for truly to stop this from happening again, because none of us have a time machine. We cannot go back into time, no matter how much we would want to. We can't. So the only thing moving forward is to prevent this from happening to other communities again. So I would like to thank all of them involved for your heart and dedication to help stop this.
And Christina, I hope you don't mind me just being direct and blunt. It's kind of a problem I have. But obviously, a lot of residents are cynical of lawyers now because of their experience in the past.
Me too.
So what's your pitch to folks so that they could know you're not just another bullshit artist who seems nice, who seems genuine, but when the quick, easy payout is there, you might change your tune?
So I am them. That's how I started my firm. My firm's called Just Well, because when I was sick, I just wanted to be well. And justice, it's about justice and wellness. But I started this law firm to help other families who were like mine. So when I show up, these are my friends. These are people like me. I don't sit on a hill and look down at the masses and think, oh, they're a little crazy. Like I think some lawyers do that, because maybe in a prior life I might have done that. But now I had that same brain damage. And what I lost in brain capacity, I gained in empathy. And I have this, I call it a sad superpower, to connect to communities. And what Chrissy said is, people are uniting. The bad guys want to divide the community. And these 744 people, they come from different backgrounds. They come with different personalities, but and some of them were represented by other counsel who are also coming with us. And we're saying we are going to take a united stand, because we don't want this to happen again. And so I'm really proud of the Keenan Law Firm and Bressman Law, who are joining me on my team, and Don Keenan will be the lead trial lawyer in the case. I'm very proud of them. And I'm very proud of all the clients who stood up and said, not again, not now.